Applejack stepped from the barn, the rope draped around her neck, shoulders pulling taut and falling slack again with every step she took. The sun poured its light down in a stream of radiant gold, a hue Applejack always did could be seen at the precise height of autumn. It bathed her in warmth, even as a playful breeze chilled her coat, and she had to pause for a moment just to take it in. This whole swathe of land, she and the ponies who came before her had carved in from the wild earth. In every direction there was a beauty and bounty in equal measure. The fields have been especially productive that year, and leaves still clung to the orchards, painting them in front of riot of color. Not fully turned, they displayed the rainbow's hues of life, warm and vibrant green, amber, dusty yellow, and all lightly stained throughout the shades of glowing red in the deepest hearts of boughs. And before her, the sea of verdant green crowned the palest gold that had been was the northern cornfield. She took a deep breath, taking in the cool scent of rich earth, spiced with the fragrance of ripe apples, sun-warmed corn cobs, and the damp, silky sweetness of the pumpkins, swollen to burst in the patch just beside the cornfield. Soon the farm would be alive with the sounds of ponies plucking for those cobs, cutting pumpkin stems, and breaking open with all their bright skins in pursuit of seeds, purees, and all matters to treat to toast and bake. Applejack smiled and resumed pulling her load with a renewed vigor. She could hardly wait. She followed the road down to the cornfield, where a wide passage had been already cut through the rows. It branched almost immediately, different routes winding and weaving out of sight. Almost as soon as turn was chosen, the cornfield maze was one of the acre's traditional autumn draws, and its opening was almost a holiday inn, and of itself for the families of Ponyville. Foals came to compete to see who could make their way out through the fastest, as well as who could rack up the most scares by jumping out of the rows at their friends. Parents, for their part, came for the chance to distract the foals for a precious few hours, but also to remember their own younger days, taking hay rides and getting lost along the warm stalks. Applejack made her way through those paths now, ignoring all the turns and misleading straightaways, taking instead a crooked path towards the center. The dead remains of cut planted crunched and snapped below her hooves, little clouds of dust rising with every step. Soon she reached the opening of the maze, a place where 5 different paths intersection and split apart, at each random of odd angles to each other. She shrugged herself out of the ropes, walked around the other side of her load, and braced her hooves underneath the limp mass of fabric and straw. "All righty, up you get," she said, easily levering the thing upright on a pole. The scarecrow swung in the sky, limbs ragdolling as little as Applejack shoved the sharpened stake into the earth. A few firm pushes saw it securely planted. Applejack stepped back and nodded in satisfaction. "You best you take your job seriously this year, you hear?" she said with a weary grin. "Don't need you all varmints out here snacking on more of the harvest that we can help." The scarecrow made no acknowledgement of her words. Its blank cloth face sagged down and off to one side, staring out into the corn as its body twisted slightly in the breeze. It wore her oldest flannel, but only for the harvest. Once Granny had the chance to patch the newest round of holes, it would keep her own withers warm throughout the winter once more, and the old hat, left behind by a hired hoof last season, completed the look, and it hung from its forelegs on the wooden crossbeam, recognizable, if not terribly convincing, imitation of a farmer, waving furiously to drive away the thieving cows. For Applejack's part, she didn't really think such things didn't matter much to protect the crops. She had seen more than a few critters munching away at the pilfered goods right underneath the scarecrows, and it was one more chore to take care of every year. But Granny's always insisted placing guardians in the field was a tradition. She said it an important thing to never forget. But Applejack had once pressed the matter and asked why exactly it was so important if it didn't keep away the birds. Granny had just chuckled and patted her head. It ain't about the reasons, Applejack. Some traditions are some older than you think, you know, older than memories sometimes. But the tradition's the only part of the memory left. That does mean that no pony remembers, or that you don't remember, Applejack had asked with a snarky grin. I'll be remembering a few more chores for you if you don't watch that mouth of yours. Now get! Applejack chuckled and shook her head at the memory. If nothing else, ponies did expect such things, decorating the farm when autumn came, just as when they expected winter starlights lighting up the trees. A few months later, a completed experience somehow, and so Applejack supposed that she would be obligated to keep the tradition up, regardless of whatever the namesake role of the scarecrow was true or not. She turned away, ready to make her way back down the paths that she had sketched and then cut herself. But she stepped away. Something cracked in the cornfield behind her, something out of sync in her own footsteps. She turned with a fixed at the scarecrow with a stern glare, half expecting to see a crow or two already perched up on the dummy out of spite. But there was no bird or no other varmint to be seen. There were only draped and spiky leaves of the field, swaying gently in the fabric figure, watching depart with its sagging baghead. She waited a moment longer, watching for any telltale sign of sneaking raiders. Then when she turned once more and left the clearing, following the path directly back to the farm, and the maid's chores was still waiting for her. I just want you to know the offer's always open, Twilight said with a chuckle, holding her hooves out in mock surrender. And we appreciate it, Sugar Cube. Don't you doubt that, Applejack said, lifting her cider mug to Twilight in acknowledgement. They sat down basking in the warm afternoon sun at one of the many tables that apples that had brought out through the Acres Harvest Festival, listening to the volunteer bluegrass band Pinky had always assembled. Ponies smiled all around them, browsing the various stands and events that popped up all over the farm. Some were run by ponies from town, others by distant Apple family members who had came to visit for the event. Brayburn was running the hay rides with Big Mac this year, and Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo were eagerly helping with the pumpkin toss, Scootaloo especially launching just as many, if not as more reject produced, as the actual participants. Families were in and out of the corn maze constantly, and just around the corner, Apple Bloom was taking her first solo shift and demonstrating the apple press and the clear, aromatic cider she beamingly served and sparkled in many mugs clustered around the table. And of course, Applejack continued, you'll always be welcome to kick some trees with us any time you want. Help is always appreciated. Always? Twilight asked. She tilted her head and gave Applejack a knowing grin. Always, Applejack empathized with a smile. I still don't understand. Why don't you let Twilight harvest the way she did that one year? Rainbow said. You'd be done in no time. Maybe, Applejack said with a gentle smile. But that was, how did you say, exceptional circumstance? At Twilight's nod, she continued. And there might be more time to place for that sometime, but farming's about more than speed, especially with the long term. Rainbow snorted. Yeah, sure, whatever. It's the truth, Applejack said with a shrug. It's a give and take kind of thing. Well, I thought it was the siblings, Rarity offered. Well, it's both kinda, Applejack laughed. Granny always says if you're going to take from the earth, you always gotta be sure to give something back in equal measure. Us earth ponies, we do that with our time. Our time, strength, love, and attention, and fair amount of sweat and tears. Sure, we coax the earth, and feeds us in good time. What are you saying that magic doesn't take effort? Rarity asked, raising a sharp eyebrow towards Applejack, who shrugged and gave Twilight an apologetic look. Hey, I'm just taking the tradition about talking traditions and whatnot. But it's true. We've always seen magic kind of shortcut. I mean, just look at how you harvest them trees. You busted them through the half of the orchard without breaking a sweat. I guess magic don't seem to be about what you put it in. It's almost getting around those parts of rules, imposing in a way, pulling in what want out of thin air with power ain't gonna be yours to begin with. Is that how Earth ponies see magic? Rarity asked, setting down her mug with a huff. Because I must protest if it seems a pathetic view, to say the least. Why even suggest Twilight that hasn't shed and sweat tears over her years of study? She's certainly shed tears, Spike said with a smirk. Then, ow! As Twilight bopped him playfully on the noggin. But you worry none, Applejack continued. We've all been doing this reel for the past few years. Not a good rhythm going. Shoot, if things keep up this way, we'll be able to hire seasonal help every year. Well, I'm glad, Twilight said with a content smile. And who knows, Applejack said. Might be plenty of seasons yet when we'll need one of them. Or what do you call them what you did? Logarithmically interrogated levitation spell, Twilight said immediately, with some logic filtering charms overlaid, of course. Of course, Rarity said approvingly. Yeah, that was it, Applejack said with a nod. Knew logging had something to do with it. Duh, Rainbow said. Trees and all. Even so, Granny Smith interjected, if you don't rely on some of the things the easy way, the Earth can be funny about things like that. If you ain't careful, you can get used to the wrong sort of thing. No best thing to do things. The best way always have been done, and the way our forebears learned it was best over the years of long and bleak. Twilight couldn't help but feel a pain of irritation to that. Not a small amount of surprise at the older pony's sudden abstinence. She wasn't about to give to the cultural debate with an elder pony on the festival day. Even on the tradition and the pride that went hoof and hoof, she supposed far better avoid bruising egos and just joining every pony's company. Of course, Granny Smith. Twilight took another sip of her own cider and sighed in happiness, sinking down a little deeper against the hay bales that reclined against, pride or no pride. No one could deny the apples knew their craft. Applejack? The circle of friends and Applejack looked up at Shirley, trotted up to them, giving a rueful grin. I am so sorry to interrupt, but could you please help me over at the moment of the corn maze? I'm worried a pipsqueak might have gotten lost. He's been in there for nearly an hour. Sure thing, Shirley, Applejack said. She grabbed her hat and tugged it down on top of her mane, then got to the hooves with a languid strength. Pish, you did say here, Applejack. I'll go look for him, Twilight, Rainbow Dash said. She pushed herself up, swaying alarmingly as she did so, and set the cider mug as close to the edge of the picnic table as it nearly toppled right off. She gave Shirley a wonky salute and nodded. I could fly over and find him, like in no time. Just watch. No, Applejack said with a laugh, stepping on Rainbow's tail and pushing her back to the rump. You ain't flying. We agreed that you were going to get an extra cup. Rainbow sulked, but pulled her mug back herself protectively. Won't be a minute, Applejack said, following Shirley over to the field. Yes, the Earth has its prodigy on the funny things, Granny Smith continued, as though she hadn't noticed the change of subject. Her head was nodding, and her eyes were unfocused, as if though seeing something far away. Most ponies don't feel it these days. You don't want to be giving it in to a taste of things that oughta ain't. No, neither root or shoot. Best to go slow with them. Her head then drooped, and suddenly she was asleep, rocking in her chair, rolling gently. Twilight grinned, staring at the knowing chuckle with the others. The conversation meandered to the doings of her friends, the subjects of work and the future plans. They all rose sometime later to put away their mugs and rejoin the festival. Twilight wondered briefly wherever Applejack had found the pipsqueak yet, but still lightly swaying at Rainbow Dash, led them over to the horseshoe toss. It's already arguing with Rarity whatever the shoes could be cleaned after each toss was the question was pushed from her mind. Hey Twilight, have you seen Applejack? Twilight turned to her the sound of Applebloom's voice, and she and Spike were picking over the pumpkins to carve for Nightmare Night. And while Spike favored the biggest one she could possibly levitate, she was holding out for one that couldn't take the hours to clean up after. Her eyebrow rose in puzzlement, glancing around the farm and around the grounds for Applebloom's head. Not for a while, I don't think. Why? Applebloom stamped her hoof in frustration. She was supposed to take over the apple press 1 round o'clock, and it's nearly 2 now. That is odd. Did you check the hay rides? I checked everywhere. I could have missed her, of course, but... I'm sorry, Applebloom. I'm not sure where I saw her last. I'll take a look around, though, and if I find her, I'll let you know you're looking. Thanks, Twilight. Twilight sat for a moment thinking back. When she had seen Applejack last. They had lunch together with the others, and then Cheerily asked her to help her find Pipsqueak, and... Had that been it? She was supposed it was, but it was more than 2 hours ago. Surely Applejack has long since finished with that. Perhaps she had gotten caught up in one other activities that their paths hadn't crossed, or she hadn't noticed that they had. She stood up and stretched her wings, rotating them and flexing her back the way Rainbow had showed her so long ago. All right, Spike, new deal. You can get whatever pumpkin you want, if you could try to carry it back to the library yourself, and no asking any pony else to carry for them. To her dismay, Spike's smile only widened. Yes, ma'am. She then shook her head ruefully, as she set about trying to lift a pumpkin easily 3 times his size, his draconic strength allowing him to make some impressive headway. Oh well, if he wanted to put in some effort, she supposed she could deal with a messy kitchen. She took to the skies, attending the bird's-eye view of the farm, only with a few wing beats. She flew in a slow circle, expecting to see Applejack's signature orange coat stand out in the matter of seconds. She cruised over at the vendor stands, the games and the picnic tables, and the bluegrass band. Her frown growing, she was unable to pick out her friend. It was certainly curious. She had no trouble spotting anyone else. Pinky, Rarity, Rainbow, Fluttershy, even the other apples. Granny remained asleep in her chair, and Big Mac was still pulling the carts through the trails around the farm. Perhaps Applejack had gone inside the house for something. Twilight swept into an easy dive as she spotted Cheerily chaperoning some of the foals through the games. It was a long shot, as she and Applejack would have finished up the search ages ago, but maybe she could still point Twilight in the right direction. Cheerily glanced up and smiled as Twilight landed next to her. Hey, Cheerily, Twilight said. Have you seen Applejack? Oh, hello, Twilight. No, I don't think I have not. Not since she brought Pipsqueak out from the maze. Huh, that was to be expected. Sure enough. Did you see where she went after that? Well, you know, now that you mention it, we didn't actually meet up when she found him. We both went in looking for him, and we took different directions to cover more ground. After a while, I found myself back at the entrance, and Pipsqueak was there playing with the others. I assumed she found him, and then went to rejoin you. Darn, Twilight said. Is everything all right? Oh, of course. Applebloom was just looking for her. Will you tell her that if you see her? Sure thing, Twilight. Cheerily nodded. Then her head snapped around. Snip, snails, I told you before, we do not drink directly from the caramel buckets. Twilight covered her mouth and hid her laugh as Cheerily left to her coral for her charges. Recovering, she gave the festival another glance over. Strange. There was a dozen easy explanations, of course. For all she knew, Applejack could have gone to town to fetch something, or other they ran out of early. Granted, she couldn't imagine what the farm itself wouldn't supply, but she wasn't familiar with the logics of this particular festival that she had become with the other Ponyville events. Her face brightened as she saw a possible lead. Oh, Pipsqueak, she called out, trotting over to where the little colt was playing some made-up games with another featherweight and Rumble. He looked up, dropping the suspiciously sword-like stick and held in his mouth in her approach. Oh, hi, Princess Twilight. Just Twilight is fine, she said. waving off some dramatic attempt in a bow. I was just wondering if you've seen Applejack, since she brought you out of the corn maze. Pipsqueak tilted his head, obviously puzzled. Applejack? Yes, Shirley said you got a little lost in the maze. Applejack said that she'd go in to help you find you. Well, oh no, not really, I guess. Well, I did, kind of. Did you know the maze is absolutely huge, Miss Twilight? I thought it was going to be kept there forever. I ran and ran and ran, and I was sure to think I may not find my way out. But when I heard the music, I followed that back. Twilight's frown shifted from confused to worried. So Applejack didn't find you? Nope, he said, with a careless shrug. Then with a sudden concern, you don't think she got lost, did you? I doubt that, Twilight said, giving him a reassuring smile. I bet she left after you did. Thanks, Pipsqueak. You go on and catch up with the others. Okay, Miss Twilight. Pipsqueak snatched up his stick and bottled, following the others deeper into the orchard. Twilight turned around to the festival, still unsettled, a sinking feeling in her gut. No one had seen Applejack for a few hours. Of course, someone had to have seen her, but it wouldn't start going from pony to pony. It wouldn't be very efficient, but an alarm she would provoke with the crowd-wide announcement was hardly warranted yet. Still, Twilight took off again, gaining just enough height to fly over the corn maze. Despite Pipsqueak's usual wild imaginings, it wasn't really that large, for all the lands of apples that had in it, 6 or 7 hoofballs fields. Applejack had said as she flew over, she could have seen the bright coats of the at least 20 or 30 ponies wandering through various states of amusement and frustration, but no familiar orange or telltale brown hat. She squinted, flying lower to check on picking as thoroughly as she did, though through the flickering lines of path and leaf made quickly her dizzy. Could Applejack have gotten hurt somehow? It seemed like at least probable thing of all, but any pony would trip and fall, and if, say, she had stumbled along the mess of plants themselves, she would certainly be harder to see. Twilight pulled up and gave the farm grounds another good survey. No, it was odd, and she didn't want to seem frantic or worse, to make others frantic. But it was time to expand the search, seeing Big Macintosh and Brayburn arrive back at the festival grounds. She had descended towards them. Big Mac, Brayburn, she said, greeting them as soon as they had touched down. Hey, I don't want to worry any pony, but we've been looking for Applejack for a bit, and we haven't been able to find her. I don't suppose she was helping you at all. Macintosh's shoulders tensed, and his expression turned a shade of more serious. Nope, he said slowly. I am sure I haven't seen her, Brayburn said. Have you checked the games? Maybe she's with that short-tempered friend of hers. I have, Twilight said, biting her lip. I have flown over the festival a few times. I am sure it's nothing. But maybe you both like to look too? Yup, Macintosh said, tossing his harness aside. Sorry, folks, he said, the waiting line of festival attendees. Taking a break. Be back before you know it. Any idea where she was last? Brayburn asked. Twilight shrugged. The corn maze, but that was 2 hours ago, and I'm going to have a closer look in that just in case. I'll let you know if I find her. Macintosh nodded and set off across the grounds with a brisk trot, Brayburn nearly having to gallop to keep up. A flop and a flap of her wings carried Twilight back to the corn maze entrance, where she caught the attention of Apple Fritter, who was selling tickets. I don't suppose you saw where Applejack went after the maze. She left the maze earlier, Twilight asked. Fritter looked thoughtful, but then shrugged. I remember her saying to watch out for the little white and brown colt she was going in to look for, but I must have missed when she brought him out. But that was a while ago. Need any help? Twilight's heart sank, but she shrugged off the feeling and shook her head. No, just let me know if you see her. Okay, I'm going to... Twilight's ears flickered when she heard and felt her gaze pulled into the entrance of the maze. Something had drawn her attention, but staring down in the first walkway, she struggled to determine exactly what. A glimpse of movement, a flash of color at the edge of her vision, just for an instant, or had been swaying of the countless layers of leaves. She frowned, taking hesitant to step closer as the uneasy sensation she had felt that earlier grew. It made no sense, but something about the field was making her coat stand on end, almost as if though she could feel something looking back at her, hiding just around the corner and out of sight. For a moment she wondered if it could be Applejack, but there was no one there. She turned to look back at Apple Fritter, but not before giving the tall stalks another lingering look. "I'm going to look around," she said, and trotted over to the first path of the maze. "Don't get lost," Apple Fritter called with a cheerful wave. Twilight stood at this intersection, wondering which way to go, left or right. She hadn't bothered to which way Applejack might have gone. Not that she intended to search every inch of the maze. She flew over the rows and rows, and was able to cover most of the field in a matter of minutes. And it would be clear whatever Applejack was there, if she had gone off the path. Twilight couldn't imagine Applejack would be in deep in the shadows, as the corn was planted so densely, and their stems are so healthy and strong. Twilight doubted that she would be able to push them very far. Hoping that Big Mac and Brayburn would soon render their search moot, she trotted down the path. She took the next available turn, and plunged into the heart of the maze. What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Ms. Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.